2. 印度文明的跨域边际传播，精神信仰为何，解脱本位的渗透逻辑。2. Cross-regional marginal propagation of Indian civilization, spiritual faith as the core, infiltration logic of liberation standard. Different from the secularity of the Waxia civilization, the Indian civilization is essentially a religious civilization. Ji Xianlin pointed out in A History of Sino-Indian Cultural Exchanges that the core of the Indian civilization is the concept of liberation moksha. Both Hinduism and Buddhism take the pursuit of life liberation as the ultimate goal, and this core trait determines that the cross-regional spread of the Indian civilization must take spiritual faith as the core driving force. Arnold J. Toynbee called Hinduism, Buddhism the universal church of the Indian civilization in a study of history, believing that it is the core spiritual carrier of the Indian civilization that spread to surrounding marginal areas after the disintegration of the Indian civilization, and can realize cross-regional faith grafting and cultural infiltration without the support of India's native political power. The cross-regional, marginal spread of the Indian civilization has formed a core logic of spiritual faith driven without the constraint of political power support. With Hinduism and Buddhism as the core, through the folk communication network of monks and merchant caravans, it completes the grafting and localized integration of faith in marginal areas, becoming the spiritual core of local political power and ethnic groups. Its spread does not require military conquest or administrative integration by India's native political power, and can even realize in-depth cross-regional infiltration during periods of division and decline of India's native political power. This logic has abundant historical evidence in 3 dimensions: Southeast Asia, Northwest, and Central Asia, and ethnic and religious formation, and cases such as Majapahit, Funan, Chenla, the spread of Hinduism, Buddhism in Afghanistan and Xinjiang, and the formation of Sikhism have become classic models of this mode. 2.1 东南亚无政权支撑的精神信仰嫁接。2.1 Southeast Asia. The grafting of spiritual faith without political regime support. Southeast Asia is the core region of the spiritual faith-driven communication mode of the Indian civilization, which fully confirms Ji Xianlin's theory of circular cultural flow and Jiang Jingkui's research on Sino-Indian Buddhist exchanges. Starting from the 1st century AD, Hinduism and Buddhism gradually spread to Southeast Asia through maritime Silk Road merchant caravans and overland monks. ND completed the spiritual faith grafting of most areas of Southeast Asia without the support of India's native political power, forming a series of Indianized states, which became the core achievement of the eastward spread of Indian spirituality. Ancient Southeast Asian states such as Funan, Chenla, and Majapahit are all typical Indianized states. The legitimacy of their political power stems from the theocratic system of Hinduism. The king is regarded as the incarnation of Brahma, or Vishnu. The caste system of Hinduism is the foundation of the social structure. Sanskrit is the official language. ND Hindu temples are the spiritual symbol of the state. Buddhism, as a supplementary belief, is widely spread among the people and in the court. These states had no suzerain vassal relationship with India's native land, nor did they accept the administrative integration of India's native political power. Their Indianization process was completely folk-level faith grafting and localized integration. Monks introduced the classics and doctrines of Hinduism, Buddhism to Southeast Asia. ND local rulers took the initiative to accept the theocratic ideas of Hinduism to strengthen the legitimacy of their political power, integrating them with local primitive beliefs, and finally forming a cultural system with both the core of Hinduism, Buddhism, and local characteristics. Ji Xianlin pointed out in A History of Sino-Indian Cultural Exchanges that the spread of Hinduism, Buddhism in Southeast Asia is a typical example of circular cultural flow. After Indian religious ideas spread to Southeast Asia, they integrated with local culture to form a new cultural form, and even influenced the development of religion in India's native land in reverse. Jiang Jingkui's research shows that the spread of Buddhism in Southeast Asia is the same as that in the Central Plains, both taking monks as bridges and folks as the foundation, and can realize in-depth cross-regional infiltration only through the attraction of spiritual faith without forced promotion by political power. This communication mode forms an extreme contrast with the Waxia civilization's priority of institution regime landing in Southeast Asia, and also becomes the core embodiment of the essential divide between the communication modes of Chinese and Indian civilizations. 2.2 西北与中亚精神信仰的跨域蔓延。2.2 Northwest and Central Asia. The cross-regional spread of spiritual faith. The spread of the Indian civilization is not limited to Southeast Asia. Its spiritual beliefs also spread cross-regionally to Afghanistan, Central Asia, and Xinjiang in the northwest through the overland Silk Road. Stavrianos pointed out in A Global History that this spread is an important part of the integration of classical Eurasian civilizations, relying on cross-regional commercial and religious communication networks, and forming two parallel veins with the westward expansion of Huaxia political power. In Afghanistan, the Kushan Empire made Buddhism its state religion during its reign, building world-class Buddhist cultural heritage such as the Buddhas of Bamiyan, and becoming an important hub for the spread of Buddhism to Central Asia and Europe. In the Sogdian region of Central Asia, Hinduism and Buddhism integrated with local Zoroastrianism, forming a pluralistic religious and cultural pattern. In Xinjiang, after Buddhism was introduced in the Han and Wei dynasties, it gradually became the mainstream belief of the 36 kingdoms of the western regions, establishing famous Buddhist cultural centers such as Kucha and Khotan. Art treasures such as the Mogao grottos in Dunhuang and the Kizil caves are all products of the integration of Indian Buddhism, local Western regions culture, and Huaxia culture. Consistent with its spread in Southeast Asia, the spread of Hinduism, Buddhism in Afghanistan, Central Asia, and Xinjiang also had no support from India's native political power. The Kushan Empire was not an Indian native political power, but a cross-regional empire founded by nomadic peoples, and its acceptance of Buddhism was an active choice of faith. The 36 kingdoms of the western regions had no political connection with India's native land, and the introduction of Buddhism was entirely the result of folk exchanges between monks and merchant caravans. This communication mode proves again that the core of the cross-regional infiltration of the Indian civilization is the attraction of spiritual faith, not the coercion of political power, and ITS communication boundary far exceeds the territory of India's native land, becoming an important spiritual and cultural link of the Eurasian continent. 2.3 吐蕃河西印度文明圈罕见的行政军事扩张，跨文明圈对撞的唯一案例。2.3 Tubo and the Hexi Corridor, a rare administrative and military expansion of the Indian cultural sphere, the only case of cross-civilizational clash. Rolf Alfred Stein, a French authority on Tibetan studies, clearly defined in Tibetan civilization that Tubo Lüyibá 到842年 AD was a marginal regime formed by the in-depth integration of Indian Buddhist civilization and the nomadic civilization of the Qinghai Tibet Plateau. Its spiritual core belongs entirely to the Indian cultural sphere. Tibetan Buddhism is a localized transformation of Indian Buddhism, inheriting the core of liberation and the cosmology of Indian Buddhism, while at the political and military level, it formed a highly centralized regime with typical nomadic traits. It is a rare case of spiritual faith plus administrative and military expansion in the history of Indian civilization's spread, forming a precise, cross-regional comparison with the Huaxia civilization's integration of Champa through institution regime plus cultural assimilation. During the reign of Songtsen Gampo, Tubo unified the Qinghai Tibet Plateau, taking Tibetan Buddhism as the national faith and the spiritual core of the regime, marrying Princess Brakuti of Nepal and Princess Wencheng of the Tang dynasty, introducing Indian Buddhist classics and statue systems, and establishing Buddhism as the state religion. At the same time, it built an administrative and military system of Tsampo centralization, ministerial aristocracy, and relying on the military advantages of nomadic peoples, it launched administrative and military conquests of surrounding areas. Among them, the long-term occupation of the Hexi Corridor, present-day Hexi area of Gansu from 755 to 848 AD, after the Angshi rebellion to Zhang Yichao's return to the Tang dynasty, is the core symbol. Tubo captured Hexi heavy towns such as Liangzhou, Gangzhou, and Suzhou, set up Jia as local administrative chiefs, implemented Tubo's household registration, tax and military systems, and realized direct administrative jurisdiction over the Hexi Corridor. At the same time, it spread Tibetan Buddhism in the Hexi Corridor, building grottos and monasteries, such as the statues and sutras of the Tubo period in the Mogao grottos, trying to deeply combine the spiritual faith of Tibetan Buddhism with administrative rule. THIS became the first time the Indian cultural sphere exported spiritual faith with administrative and military force as the carrier, forming an essential difference from the classic mode of Hinduism, Buddhism, in Southeast Asia of no political power support, pure folk grafting.